What happens if shouts are less powerful than silence? Can the fate of the men who founded empires on misery be changed by symbols etched in dust? What if the one they believed to be broken was only waiting? This is the untold tale of Virginia slave No. 76, a silent guy who drew the V on the floor of the large home. The master died the night he did. Jonah was who? Why doesn't anyone dare say his name out loud? Ashford Plantation in southeast Virginia produced more than cotton under the unrelenting sun of late summer 1849. It carried silence, a dense, immobile silence that hung like fog. Jonah, who was simply identified as a slave, number 76 in the men's ledgers, walked into it. He glided between the rows like a mist, invisible to his captors and only dimly recalled by the other slaves. He was born deaf and deaf. Never to his face, they referred to him as the silent Ashford. Jonah served everyone even though he was nobody's property. He swept floors, cleaned tools, and got water without being asked to do so, not because he was told to, but because he saw and understood. He had elderly eyes that were always calculating, as though they were listening through the skin to a frequency of pain that others could not endure. Despite his inability to communicate, he possessed language. With fingertips charred from the fire pit, Jonah traced intricate spirals and crossing lines in the soil outside the slave quarters at night, while others slept. These designs vanished by dawn but never came again. The plantation's master, Elias Ashford, was a tall, booted, short-tempered guy. Beyond the confines of his territory, his power was felt in bank parlors, local courtrooms, and the quivering palms of the men who owed him. His presence was dread, and he governed by presence. He snarled the name of the whip he was carrying, "Mercy!" as if the word had become meaningless. However, Jonah was marked by it. Nobody was sure why. Years ago, he had merely returned from the large mansion one morning with a V-shaped mark etched on his shoulder. No one dared question this emblem. But among slaves, tales were more enduring than physical remains. Like the wind, whispers flowed. In the past, Jonah had belonged to a man in New Orleans who attempted to teach him how to read the Bible but died while he slept. According to another story, Jonah was heard uttering chants that summoned objects from bone and dirt, older than the whip and older than the crucifixion, but not in English or words. They claimed that he occasionally had dreams that came true when he was awake. Everyone knew he watched, but nobody knew if he prayed. Kids stayed out of his line of sight. Food was left by his door by elders. Even the most ruthless overseers were hesitant to touch him, not out of sympathy but instinct. Despite his threat, Jonah was not feared. Because he was feared. He didn't recoil. He didn't plead. And Jonah had made silence his weapon in a location where it was frequently necessary to remain silent in order to survive. Claire Ashford was the only one who appeared to pay attention, the sole daughter of the master. Her father is half ignoring and 18 years old. With a sketchbook in hand, she strolled along the field's boundaries while wearing long clothes. Jonah appeared to her as a living relic, a creature from a European Gothic novel she had previously read by candlelight. Her breath caught in her throat as she saw him kneel by the old fig tree near the border of the cane field, setting something at its base, while she started to watch him covertly, hiding behind trees. Occasionally there are feathers, stones, or nothing at all. He never gave her a direct glance. But once he moved his head slightly to let her know he was aware of it and grinned without being snarky. She stopped following after that day. Not affectionately, but enough to convey, "I see you too." And during a storm without lightning that night, the fig tree broke in two. The overseer said the following morning, "It must have been rot." Jonah never looked up when sweeping the large house's front porch. He didn't have to. The fields weren't meant for Claire Ashford. Her voice was gentle and cautious, as if every word may awaken something that should be left asleep, and her hands were white and unblemished by work. She walked the estate as if she were a ghost, not wholly acknowledged by the governing world, nor fully a part of the world of the oppressed. Elias, her father, was not much of sentiment and even less of tenderness. He saw Claire as an inheritance vehicle, a future wife for someone useful and a required formality. He hardly ever mentioned her name. In turn, she sought comfort not in the chapel or parlor, but in the outskirts, in the shade between buildings, and in the stillness of midday when the fields were stilled by the heat. She first saw Jonah there, not seen but noticed, beyond the hedge and out of the housekeeper's line of sight. He walked differently than other people. He sailed. Even though he didn't have a specific employer, his hands were never idle. As if exposing something ancient beneath the dirt, she once saw him spend hours sweeping the dust from the stones behind the smokehouse. Another time, he stood looking at a wasp's nest in the rafters, seemingly still for an age. Claire started a journal. Half-formed ideas, scrawled impressions, and sketches. She writes that he hears something, but not with his ears. One afternoon, with a mixture of curiosity and resistance, Claire went up to Jonah, who was sitting under the split fig tree. He remained still. Nothing had changed as she cleared her throat. With her notebook in hand, she gently went around him. Another, more complex symbol than the ones she'd seen near the quarters was at his feet in the dust. Dots grouped at cardinal points, spirals folding into angles. Jonah looked up and she leaned to examine it. His eyes were steady. They were aware, not afraid or defiant. "What is it?" she inquired, not anticipating a response. He blinked. He then slowly raised a finger, pointing away from the ground but in the direction of the sun, not the sun itself, but the area directly next to it, where light and shadow meet. Claire had a fire-related dream that night. It was a humming fire, not a burning one. In the middle of everything stood her father, unburned yet immobile. Ageless, faceless figures swarmed around him. She woke up to sweat-soaked bed linens and the lingering odor of ash. She insisted on the fig tree being felled the following morning. Dismissing it as just another of her whims, her father sneered but permitted it. By lunchtime, the tree had been chopped down. The air became silent and heavy that night. Birds did not sing. The animals resisted being let out of their enclosures. Claire didn't get much sleep. With an unidentified weight on her heart, she sat by the window and gazed into the night. Jonah stood in the darkened yard far below, his bare feet slowly pressing into the soil to create patterns that no wind could remove. He stood beneath the empty sky. The Ashford seal appeared on the invitation, bone-thick parchment pounded with red wax. Gentlemen, plantation owners, judges, and those whose wealth was measured in bodies rather than coins gathered there. Elias Ashford didn't cut any corners. They brought in musicians from Richmond. French brandy barrels were carried into the cellar, and secretly embroidered Savannah silks came. The large, typically stern and melancholy home was cleaned till it glittered like a gravestone. As usual, Jonah was placed in the center of preparation but received no guidance. He worked alone and without supervision for 3 days, sweeping and mopping the large hall. Nobody questioned it. The overseers had stopped attempting to manage him a long time ago. He seemed to be moving according to a pattern that only he could perceive. Jonah stayed in the hall after the lanterns had been extinguished on the last night before the party. Like a stage ready for its performers, the wooden floor was illuminated by the moon's pale light streaming through the towering windows. Jonah knelt silently, a tiny pouch full of bone dust and charcoal in one hand. He started to draw slowly and deliberately. Slowly, the Veve, sacred and careful emblem came into view. A symmetrical map of intentions rather than locations was created by interlacing lines that curled into one another. The corners were indicated with dots. The corners were indicated with dots. At the center, crosses met. It was more than just art. It was an invocation. Every stroke is a whisper, a breath for each turn. The drawing was finished by daybreak, big enough to fill the room, and subtle enough to blend in with the dancing feet of the unaware. The hall echoed with the clinking of glasses and artificial laughing as the visitors, clad in waistcoats and fake civility, entered. Although it was now hidden by migration and marriage, the Veve was still there. The music wavered. The air became dense. Men drank little, yet they stumbled. A maid passed out close to the stairs, babbling incoherently in a language she didn't understand. A judge swore it was blood after spilling wine on his shoes. Then came the elderly, slender-lipped, and ruthless senator from Williamsburg, whose remarks were rife with hatred for both abolitionists and those who advocated for mercy. His legs failed him as he entered the middle of the room. He dropped violently, causing the room to go silent, and he hit the floor with a crack that sounded like gunshots. His mouth frothed when raised, and his eyes gazed vacantly at the ceiling. He remained silent. Before the night was over, whispers started. Those who went over the middle of the floor murmured in low tones of a chill that crept up their spines, waiting, unseen, and heavy. Some blamed the heat, while others blamed the wine. Jonah was not seen that night. He was gone before the first visitor showed up. Elias Ashford was discovered dead in his study in the morning. No blood, no wound, no indication of fight. In a final hushed gasp, his mouth and eyes were open, his body twisted and tight in his chair. His palms, his nails were broken from the tight grasp he had on the chair's arms. His lips were stained with a black film. It was an apoplexy caused by excitement, according to the hastily called physician, but the servants whispered otherwise. They claimed that Jonah's sweeping broom was left unused in the corner, seemingly waiting for the dust to return, that the ink in Elias's ledger had gone to ash overnight, and that the dogs would not come inside. Elias Ashford was not mourned on the plantation. It flinched back. The large home remained motionless in the days after his passing, its shutters shutting like a corpse's eyes. Pale and reclusive, Claire stayed in her room and claimed to be ill. The rhythm was different, yet the fields continued as always. A temporary overseer, a man sent by the county who was unaccustomed to the land and despised by everyone who worked it, was now issuing orders. He tried to make up for the master's absence by barking orders with a fake authority, but there were other absences. Jonah had left. He hadn't been seen since the night of the party. His room was undisturbed, his bed linens were folded nicely, and his few belongings, a spoon, a piece of fabric, and a single button, were still there. They didn't say his name out loud, but he was there. His co-workers started to imitate his quiet routines, sweeping without being asked, placing little stones in strategic patterns close to doors, and avoiding the fig tree stump for no apparent reason. A toddler discovered a symbol carved into the barn's side one morning, the same V that had shown up on the floor of the ballroom. It had been sketched in chalk, then covered with a darker substance and what appeared to be ash. No one offered to scrub it away, as the overseer had instructed. By lunchtime, his hand was blistered from doing it himself. Fear does not spread as quickly as rumors. They said that Jonah had not gone, but had instead entered another realm, that he had decided not to go back after stepping beyond the veil, that his drawings had been portals rather than warnings, his gaze a mirror, and his quiet a shelter. An elderly, partially blind woman in the kitchens claimed to have once seen him with coal-like eyes in the smoke rising from the hearth. After that, she became quiet and didn't talk again till she passed away. Then the fire broke out. It started at the edge where the old fig tree used to stand, not in the fields or the house. A peculiar light flickered through the trees at dark. At first, there were only a glow rather than flames, as though the air itself had caught fire. By evening, the tree stump was burning from the inside out, consuming nothing in its vicinity with a sluggish, inhuman heat. The stump went to cinders without smoke, but the grass stayed green and the earth remained unscorched. Claire observed from her window. Her fever had subsided, but it had been replaced by something colder. She held her notebook, the one with the drawings of symbols she didn't understand, close to her chest. Her hands shook. She recalled the smile on Jonah's face. She recalled the Veve. The dream came back to her. She vanished a week later. Traveling by bus to an aunt's mansion near Baltimore, they were left without saying goodbye. According to the housekeeper, she didn't talk the whole way. She had a light trunk. She just took the notepad, the clothing, and the letters. Although the plantation was still there, a fundamental change had occurred. Tools broke for no apparent reason. The ox would not plow close to the stump. Kids woke up. Kids woke up, screaming from dreams they were unable to explain. Before midday, the new overseer started drinking. Even the county eventually became weary of overseeing the property and turned it up to creditors. And occasionally a shape could be seen close to the tree-line in the ensuing silence when the wind died down and the crows forgot to come back. Unmoving, barefoot, head cocked to the sky. There was no regrowth of the fig tree. By the spring of 1850, people were avoiding Ashford Plantation. In order to get around its gates, travelers took longer paths. Workers in the field whispered about dark, moving shadows. For reasons they could not identify, the few people who stayed on the land, Old ladies too exhausted to run, males too broken to be sold, spoke little, worked slowly, and left offerings at the base of trees. The estate's new owner, a Petersburg merchant who bought it through debt settlement, was only there for 3 months. His animals died in droves, but he came with ledgers and hoped that things would be better. After nights of noises they could not explain, his servants ran away. Additionally, the floor started to distort in the ballroom where the V had previously been drawn, with boards bowing and splitting as though something slow, purposeful pulses squeezed upward beneath them. He never came back after selling the estate at a loss. According to the official record, Jonah was never located. He was listed as a male, black, dumb, unknown in age, and of unknown origin in a fleeing slave record. The left shoulder is marked. Ashford Plantation, December 1849, last seen. There was a reward, but no hunter accepted the challenge. Some borders were not crossed among their kind. Years went by. The buildings decayed, fences were eaten by vines, the cane fields became untamed and eventually desolate, and eventually Ashford's name vanished from maps, although not recalled. Children from nearby counties were cautioned against wandering close to the woods. They were informed about a man who had night water-like eyes, walked silently, and used his hands to whisper. They stated he occasionally cut shallow symbols into stone or left them in soot on tree trunks. Those who discovered them were transformed but not hurt. They dreamed of non-burning fire, chatted less, and slept less. The large house's ruins were discovered by a traveling preacher in 1872 as he was looking for cover from a storm. He claimed that the house was still barely standing with dark windows and a partially fallen roof. He discovered that the ballroom floor was still there but covered in moss. Beneath the decay and rubble, he also discovered a symbol burned into the wood rather than painted or drawn. Unmistakably shaped and meticulously engraved, it appeared brand new. He departed at sunrise and never preached again. In 1883, Claire Ashford passed away in Baltimore without a spouse. Her meager possessions were a mirror, 2 letters, and a battered notebook with drawings of trees, symbols, and an unnamed man. He didn't curse the house. He remembered it, she wrote in her last journal, which was scrawled in a shaking hand. A file in a Richmond courthouse basement is yellowed and water damaged. It has the same case number as Jonah's registry, which is 76. The majority of the pages are absent. The last sheet has a brief note that reads, "Subject vanished, property unsettled, presence persistent," yet it has no heirs or estate listed. People who live close to Ashford's former location now know to keep some things unaltered. You never spill salt. After sunset, ash is never cleaned. Additionally, if something too dark to be dust draws a V onto your floor on a calm night, you do not give it a cleaning. You avoid it. You allowed it to remain. Allowed it to remain.